I was listening to some music on Sirius XM on the drive over here this morning. Remember the Mamas and the Papas? Mama Cass. I was like, oh, it's so nice to hear her voice. And then that opened up a memory of a co-worker that some of us knew, Marcia Barnum, who passed several years ago. And I always, when I thought of Marcia, I thought of Mama Cass. They both have beautiful voices, same body structure. Anyway, it was a wonderful drive over here. And for those of you that watch CNN, I think it was Gerard Zakaria. I think it was his program this morning that Madeleine Albright was interviewed. So she was interviewed from home. She was talking about leadership of women and how they are coming forth and demonstrating in various countries how they're handling the COVID-19. And that I found this interesting. She felt like the countries that are being led by women are the countries that conquered the COVID-19 before other countries. She had a lot to say about women in roles of leadership, and I thought, she must have read or had a subjective contact with Helena Rourke. It was just like she was reading right out of the books of Agni Yoga and the letters of Helena Rourke, the role that women should be playing today. It was so inspiring. It's probably on YouTube. So this morning, I'm talking about Agni Yoga and expansion of consciousness. It always is a challenge to give a definition of Agni Yoga. And I think the reason it's such a challenge is that I don't want to pigeonhole it into one definition or one sentence. And so how do you define something that cannot be compartmentalized or cannot be reduced into one sentence? Well, I don't know. Anyway, so I'm going to try this morning. This is what I came up with as a preface to the talk this morning, that the Agni Yoga teaching is the teaching of the inner fire, the core, the self within our true being. The core is the divinity that is living within us. So it is the practice of Agni Yoga, the practice of the disciplines of Agni Yoga that activate these inner fires, the divinity within ourselves. And when this inner fire is ignited, what is in essence Agni Yoga is teaching, is saying, is now our potential has the ability to manifest itself through our dreams and visions. So that is a sort of definition to Agni Yoga, trying to make it practical and understandable, that it is the teaching of the inner fire. And when we begin to practice, put the disciplines of Agni Yoga into our day-to-day living experience, then the potential within us is activated. And through this wonderful outpouring energy of Agni, our dreams, our visions begin to manifest. The purpose of our life begins to manifest. So the practice of Agni Yoga ignites the core within us, the self, capital S self that is trying to manifest. The fires of Agni transmute, transform, transfigure the whole of our nature, and enables the way for the fuller expression of our inner divinity. What I like to do in my own thinking processes about Agni Yoga and the practice of Agni Yoga is to insert the ideas, the principles, the disciplines of Agni Yoga into every day of my life, or perhaps better said, into every event that is occurring in my life, my family's life, the life of the country, the life of the planet. And when this happens, it's when you begin to think this way and put the disciplines of Agni Yoga into your life in this manner, you become an Agni Yogi. You become a practitioner of Agni Yoga. You don't have to wear special clothing. You don't have to put your body through certain postures, because you become the exemplary, the walking image, the walking example of what Agni Yoga is. So that's probably the best definition that we could really give of Agni Yoga, is being an Agni Yogi. If you want to know more about the definition of Agni Yoga, meet an Agni Yogi. But isn't that great? Isn't that great? Okay, so an Agni Yogi is one whose fires have transmuted, transformed, and transfigured the whole of their nature, their beingness. And in so doing, they live in the full expression of that inner divinity. So an Agni Yogi is not a couch potato. An Agni Yogi is not someone who at the end of their lives were unable to accomplish something. Just the opposite of that. And in their accomplishments, they are expressing the purpose of their life. So this is what it means to be an Agni Yogi. As souls, we must advance. We must create ourselves in such a way that our consciousness expands into higher and higher spheres of light. To enable our spark, the spark that's called the spark of divine fire, to advance, then we must ultimately or finally place ourselves on the path of perfection, the path of self-perfection. There is perhaps one caveat. This caveat is a cosmic law, a most just law, and it is the law of free will. We can use this gift of life, this gift of free will, either for construction or destruction. So I'm leaving you with this idea to think about this week. How can free will be destructive, or how can free will be constructive? Here's a story. It was said about John the Little that one day he said to his older brother, "I want to be free from care and not to work, but just to worship God without interruption." And he took his robe off and went into the desert. After staying there for 1 week, he returned to his brother. And when he knocked on the door, his brother asked, without opening the door, "Who is it?" The brother replied, "It's John, your brother." The brother said, "John has become an angel and is not among people anymore." Then he begged and said, "It's me, it's me." But his brother did not open the door and left him there in distress until the next morning. And finally, he opened the door and said, "If you are a human being, you have to work in order to live." Then John repented, saying, "Forgive me, brother, for I was wrong." So the point is this: we have an inner core. We have a divine spark. We have spirit. But we must strive to unleash its potential. To strive means to work, to labor, as a means to bloom the flower of our divinity. So this is why in the Agni yoga teaching, the word strive is found throughout the entire series of books. It's found in the letters of Helena Rourke. It's found in the writings of Nicholas Rourke. It's found in the writings of everyone who is an expression of the lineage of Agni Yoga. Striving. We must strive to unleash the potential of the divinity of our inner core. In the book Agni Yoga, it reads, and I quote, "The yogi, by consciously changing the state of his body, achieves a greater tension in the work of the spirit." I'm going to repeat this. The yogi, by consciously changing the state of his body, achieves a greater tension in the work of the spirit. He shortens the periods of rest between incarnations. But even during his rest, he continuously directs his thoughts toward useful action. Thus, through incessant labor, he unites the separate worlds and affirms the realization of all that exists. Helena Rourke, in teaching her students, wrote, "It is sad when the spirit, after making its life circle, returns to the same point." Isn't that profound? Oh my gosh. So let me read it again. "It is sad," she said, "when the spirit, after making its life circle, returns to the same point." Throughout centuries, people have sensed something greater and deeper within themselves than their normal waking consciousness could even grasp. And as such, most have at some point in their life or lives sought to find that deeper part, their spirit, their inner core, that inner fire. And you hear people say things to you from time to time that they're looking for something, right? They're seeking something. That's that instinct, that inner impulse that has, I think it's coming from the capital S self during certain cycles within our lives that is encouraging us to look at the deeper meaning of life. And once we make contact with that inner fire, that's when it's like we become a completely different human being. And the thing is, going back to this verse, quoting, "By consciously changing the state of our body, we achieve a greater tension in the work of the spirit." So the key word is consciously changing. The only way we can consciously change the state of our beingness is through striving. And not just striving for a year or 2 or 3 years, but constant striving, constant activity in an activity that is rhythmic and significant and purposeful. So if not, she says, it is sad when our spirit, after making its life circle, returns to the same point. So Agni energy kindles the inner fires. There are many inner fires, but there are 3 key fires. It's called a triple fire, and this triple fire is called electric fire, solar fire, and fire by friction. So here's the definition of each. Electric fire, so we can understand these terms better, we can relate to this, that an fire is resourced from the intuitional plane of consciousness. Electric fire is resourced from the substance of intuition. Solar fire is drawn from the higher mental plane. So when we say it's resourced, what are we resourcing? We're resourcing the substance that's found, the light, the love, the power, these higher frequencies of light, the higher frequencies of love, the higher frequencies of power that are resourced in the higher mental plane. So when our consciousness elevates itself, uplifts itself into the higher mental body, this is when the fire of solar energy is activated. Fire by friction is the lesser fire, and it's the fire that most of us are very familiar with. Just think of the word friction, right? Fire by friction. Now, fire by friction relates to the substance of the physical sun. And what that means to me is that the physical sun is a symbol for us. So when we look at the sun, we think of it or recognize it as a symbol of fire by friction. Now, what does it mean? Fire by friction is drawn from the karma. Fire by friction is being drawn by the karma of our physical, etheric, emotional, and lower mental bodies. And thus it's called fire by friction. Okay? Okay. The higher self, the solar fire, dwells in the higher mental body. The divine spark labors, strives to raise the consciousness of our personality into the higher mental body. So we could say that the higher self is to our human soul as our human soul is to its lesser lives. So the higher self is important. We want to find the disciplines listed in Agni Yoga for us to practice that will activate this refined fire called solar fire in the higher mental body. Most of us on this spiritual path are consciously on the path of perfectment. To be on the path of perfectment means we are striving to expand our consciousness. So another way to say it, if we want to expand our consciousness, we must strive to change our bodies. Isn't that easy? This puts us on the path of perfectment. Being on the path of perfectment means we are striving to expand our consciousness. To expand our consciousness means we are kindling the inner fires. This is how we expand our consciousness. And the real practical way to understand this is by striving to change who we are. Path of perfectment. Master Moria says, the labor of endless perfectment is ordained by us the capital S. The labor of endless perfectment is ordained by us. And in moments of difficulty, think about us, knowing that the wireless apparatus will not delay in connecting you with us. But learn to think and to distinguish the moment of real difficulty. So you see what he is saying in here? What is real? What difficulty is real? And the question is, well, why? Why should we distinguish the moment of real difficulty? Well, to me, it means that when we have the ability to distinguish the moment of real difficulty is what is an impulse to help us strive more toward self-perfectment. He's also, again, in my opinion, it's a good opinion actually, that not all difficulties in our life are related to the purpose of our life, are not all related to the manifestation of the purpose of our life. So we have to distinguish the moments of real difficulties. There's so much we could talk about here, and I'm not going to do it because of time constraints, but also because Agni Yoga, the teaching, the writing of Agni Yoga is presented to us in such a way that it opens our own thinking, opens the portal to our own thinking. It makes us think, right? So oftentimes people take good fortune for calamity, not recognizing the opportunity as a gift. Expansion of consciousness will affirm spirit knowledge, and this knowledge will lead to our community, says Master Morya. Expansion of consciousness will affirm spirit knowledge, and this knowledge then will lead us to their community, the community of hierarchy, the community of brotherhood, the community of the ashram. Those on the path of Agni Yoga are striving to unite with higher and greater fires within their consciousness. The secret doctrine teaches that from the amoeba to man, each received their monads, in which all the higher qualities are potential. And thus it is our responsibility and our opportunity to release our higher potential. This is profound for me. As I get older, and fortunately still, besides allergies, healthy, that my life will never be a life of retirement. The life of an Agni Yogi will never be the life of retirement. Even between incarnations, we're now being told it's not going to be a time of rest. Being on this path, recognizing and studying and having this great gift of teaching before us inspires us, causes us to aspire to develop that potential, which apparently is unlimited. Apparently is unlimited. The only limitation, you know what I'm going to say, the only limitation is our own thinking. That I can't do this. I'm too old to do that. I'm not educated enough. I don't live in the right town, the right family. I don't have enough money on my checking account, or I'm under-deposited. Although I'm not, because I got the stimulus check this week, so It's like, we're rich. Anyway, so I have to put a little humor in this. It's very strange in this very quiet, silent room. In this sanctuary, there's hardly anyone here. So I, using my imagination, that we're filled to the brim. Anyway, one of the powers of the Buddha was that he had so much love. He saw people trapped in the notions of a small, separate self. He saw people feeling guilty or proud of that self. And he offered revolutionary teachings that echoed like a lion's roar, like a great rising tide. So like a great rising tide, he gave teaching that would help people to wake up, to break free from the prison of ignorance. So when we think this way, when we think about the teachings of the Buddha, not Buddhism, just like when we think about the teachings of Christ, we're not talking about the dogma of Christianity or the dogma of Buddhism, but the original teaching. And this is what draws all great ones to these original teachings. So Agni Yoga, there's so much about the principles and laws of the teaching of Buddha found within Agni Yoga. And this is why I brought it in, because Buddha saw this, he sees this, and because of his love and compassion and caring about humanity, he was able to see people that were trapped and wanted to help them wake up and break free from their prison of ignorance. If we do not expand our consciousness, our higher qualities then remain only potential. The ageless wisdom reminds us that there are three major expansions of consciousness, which I mentioned earlier: transmutation, transformation, transfiguration. So these three major expansions of consciousness, as we undergo transmutation, transformation, transfiguration, these three stages, almost, it's like this is the great plan for the advancement of our striving human soul. Activates the potential, activates the fires, kindles the fires that Agni Yoga talks so much about. So in the rest of the time this morning, I'm going to talk about these three major expansions of consciousness, starting with transmutation. The teaching explains that transmutation is mostly concerned with the transference of force from the lower centers, our lower centers, to the corresponding higher centers. And this is related to the physical and etheric body. This is where change begins. The process of creativity begins. The process of changing our bodies begins through transmutation. As the substance of these centers become refined and pass into a more radiatory state of existence, we then say that person is on the path of transmutation. If we go back to that repeatable quote of Helena Rourke, you can see, even if we do not move beyond this first stage of expansion of consciousness, when we pass, we are not going to return back to the same point that we were at when we came into incarnation. Transmutation is the result of the action of fire. We transmute our physical body, for example, through the fire of mind, which means through the fire of concentration. For example, concentration can be symbolized by way of a magnifying glass, concentrating the light of the sun upon an object. So, in fact, concentration is the response of our life to the evolutionary process and the magnetic pull of the higher self. Concentration is the response of our life to the evolutionary process. Transmutation leads us to the first major expansion of consciousness, in which our physical body and the life force now come under the control of the unfolding human soul. On higher levels, this means that our personality is now going to be superseded by the energy of our higher self. By transmuting desire into aspiration and aspiration into determination. This leads us through the whole process of transmutation. Aspiration into determination. Transmutation is how our physical body becomes energetic and charged with the fire to serve. So you will see people engaged in selfless service will be in the process of transmutation, and this process helps them to expand their consciousness, and through the expansion of consciousness, their service increases. See how it works? This means what? Inertia, depression, laziness, apathy disappears. Fear, greed, and vanity disappears. This is something that the common consciousness cannot understand, for the common consciousness is rooted in past anger and hatred and jealousies and fears. It is through this process, this transmutational process, that our body, our physical body, emotional body, mental mechanism begins to grow so beautifully. When transmutation occurs, we become tender. Our emotional body becomes, or at least reflects, intuitive light, and the mental body reflects the light of the higher mind. When our body is purified to a certain degree through transmutation, our health increases. Our energy and dynamism increases. Our body becomes more adaptable to the changing conditions of life. Our emotional body radiates joy. I'm interrupting myself. I'm smiling because all of these thoughts, are rushing through my brain. I think, I'd so like to be able to stop and discuss what we're talking about here, where our body is becoming more adaptable to the changing conditions of life. Well, we can ask ourselves, is it? Are we? The entire planet is undergoing changing conditions of life. Are we going to slow down and be patient and tolerant and understanding and let this change occur in accordance with the rhythm of hierarchy, or in accordance with the rhythm of the leaders of countries, or of our own desires and impatience? Our emotional body radiates joy and love and peace, and will not distort the intuitional flashes coming to it from higher planes. Our mental body is transmuted, and when this occurs, our mental body becomes a clean mirror for higher visions and revelations, and develops an advanced power of creativity. So at this point, the color of our mental body will turn into a pure lemon color. So if you see If you have the ability, the psychic ability to see colors in the aura of someone, when you see this person has pure lemon yellow color, you will know that they have a pure mental body. Transmutation is the development and refinement of the atoms of our body. Transmutation is the development and refinement of the atoms of our bodies. Now, the second major expansion is called transformation. Transformation are moments in which we clearly see our image. These are the high moments in which transformation begins in our nature. It's like that first moment, that first contact that you had, let's say, with your earthly teacher. That was the moment that you began to see an image of who you could be in the future. For example, a friend told me that he had a revelation when he neglected to help someone. He said he suffered for a long time for this negligence, and he saw his true nature in comparison to the principles that he taught others. So here was a teacher teaching the principles of the teaching, and yet he neglected to help someone in need. That was a revelation to him. So he didn't see it as a failure, but a revelation of what he believed in, but didn't practice in that moment. That's transformation. Confrontation with our real self is a transformative experience. It is a spiritual experience. Experience of higher points can also come from contact with those who are on the subjective levels, such as a voice calling your name. I know of someone in this room who had this experience because he told me about it, where he heard a voice subjectively calling his name. Or another experience where there is an appearance of a hand, or a face, or a head, or even a body appears. These are transformative experiences. A direct conversation, this is even more rare. A direct conversation from one who is from the other worlds becomes a transformational experience. These are the moments which stir all of our fires, moments in which every cell and atom in our body passes through transformational joy. You see your existence in the light of the real. When you pass through such soul experiences, you cannot remain as you were. Not only a new stirring emerges from your heart, but also a will to dedicate yourself to the service of others. When you stand face to face with death, is also a transformational moment. When such experiences occur in our lives, we become humble. I will never forget when I was in my 20s and I was sitting in the doctor's office and he says, "You have cancer." It was an experience, a phenomenon. It was like this wave, this I wouldn't call it a transformational wave, even though it was, but it was a wave of energy that just rushed through my entire being. And I'd never experienced anything like that before. And the whole room that the doctor was in, that I was in, it's like everything blanked out. And when I got up and left the doctor's office, I was fearless. I had no fear of dying. But he tried to plant that seed in me. Says, I'm sorry, but the tests tell us that it was an advanced stage of cancer. Well, 100 years later, I'm still here. And it was an experience that teaches us to become more humble. As we enter a transformational process, we become increasingly more humble. Okay, I'm going to skip through some of this. We are told that the transforming agent in us is the higher self. And as I said earlier, the nature of the higher self is solar fire. Remember, we had electric fire, solar fire, fire by friction. The higher self is solar fire. Transformation occurs when we open a pathway through advanced meditation, where the fire flows down and releases the potentials within the spark that was stated about in the secret doctrine. The human monad is the divine spark within us. It is what is real within us. It is sometimes referred to as the awareness unit, that monad, that divine spark. It does not die, but evolves and progresses. According to the secret doctrine, it says that at one time, human beings had huge animal-like bodies, possessing no intellect. They were devoid of intelligence. These were the first human beings that were part of the first half of the third root race about 18 million years ago. And it was only at the midpoint of that third root race that the human being was then finally endowed with the higher mind. And once united, then received the monad. I find that interesting if you like esoteric history. So transformation leads us to the second major expansion of consciousness, which is called the second initiation of the threshold. The third major expansion of consciousness is transfiguration. It is the electric fire, and that electric fire is part of the spiritual triad. That's where it's resourced. This electric fire gradually pours down into our personality by way of advanced meditation. So the light of the spiritual triad, which works through the higher mind, releases the light found within the atoms of our three bodies, the three bodies of the personality, and produces that great experience called enlightenment. So, individuals who are illumined, who are obviously enlightened, are those who have experienced that third expansion of consciousness called transfiguration. It is with this achievement that our astral body disappears along with its glamours and illusions. The illusions of the mental body are washed away, and we then stand in the light of the spiritual triad. Transfiguration means that our physical, our etheric, our emotional and mental bodies are now becoming dynamically radioactive with the beauty of our capital S self, our spirit. I'm going to repeat this, even though we're going to run over a little bit, but not much. Transfiguration means that our physical, etheric, emotional, and mental bodies become dynamically radioactive with the beauty of our capital S self, our spirit. So we tend to think that transfiguration is far away from us, but in fact it is not. We can achieve this state of consciousness, transfiguration consciousness, through living a life that is of sacrifice, dedication, meditation, love, and traveling the path of perfection. We all have the ability to transmute, transform, and transfigure ourselves so that eventually we will stand as shining flames. As we travel the path of self-perfectment, our inner fire fuses with our vehicles and synthesizes them, synthesizes our physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual bodies in such a way that they are now galvanized, totally galvanized in light. And it is then that we pass through an experience of transfiguration, which is the result of the release of the fire within our entire beingness. To fuse with the inner fire means we submit our personal separative will to the will of the inner essence. And this is probably, for many, many, many incarnations, outrageously difficult for people to submit themselves to the will of their inner essence. I was thinking of Como this morning, who's the governor? Who is he? The governor of New York, and he was talking about a personality disorder. I've never heard it before, and he says it's not on the books, but it's deniers. And the way he explained that is that it's like you tell your kid, you can't go out tonight until you finish your homework. And the kid immediately becomes a denier. He goes completely against what you were saying. And as a parent, what you were saying, what you were asking him to do. We do the same thing. We have a teacher and we say, don't tell me what to do. I'm already smart. If you all have children and a teenager, you know that teenagers have a natural syndrome. It's called the denier syndrome. That's where, remember when I was talking a little bit earlier about free will can be constructive or destructive? We have the free will to respond to the will of our inner essence, or we can deny the will of our inner essence and submit to our personal separative will. That's free will. But why waste a lifetime living according to the dictates of the past? And Agni, let me end with this. An Agni yogi is a person who unifies him or herself with the whole, with the essence of all, because the person is truly uplifted with fire, and they radiate fire, and that fire is recognized in will and purpose and energy and joy and bliss. The first method of expansion of consciousness is for us to view everything that is related to us from the viewpoint of the future. So I'm going to end here. I had a little bit left, but not too much. Expansion of consciousness, Agni Yoga, the pandemic that we are going through. How can we use it as a stage of expansion of consciousness?